Michigan has issued emergency rules for adult use marijuana, in part because the law requires it. The law provides that the regulator will issue rules to implement the Michigan Regulate and Tax Marijuana Act. We call it MRMA. In addition, the regulator wants to fill in a lot of the details that are absent from this statute and often absent from other laws. We see regulations implementing laws often because the lawmakers create a skeleton and then the regulator fills in all the flesh and bones of the details of that law. So essentially, we have emergency rules because the law requires it, and it's a way to really provide detail to our citizens on what the law requires. The emergency rules address a number of details that are relevant to the implementation of the adult marijuana use law. The areas in which these details emerge are, for example, in the types of licenses that would be allowed under the law. The criteria, the precise criteria that the regulator would apply in determining whether an applicant for that particular type of license had met the underlying criteria. The fee structure under which the licenses would be issued and the annual charges that might be applicable to a license holder for a particular type of license. These are temporary rules and they are subject to revision by the regulator. That doesn't necessarily mean that the regulator will make a lot of changes to these rules. Based on our experience with the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act and the emergency rules that were issued under that law a couple of years ago, I think it's unlikely that we will see significant changes. The reason that these rules are promulgated as emergency rules rather than final rules is that it requires the regulator to take a lot fewer steps in getting the actual language of the rules out before the public and to take input from the public on those rules. But generally, our experience is that in this case, these rules probably will be tinkered a little bit with at the end of 6 months, but not much. There are a number of major provisions to these emergency rules that really flesh out the skeleton that was established under MRMA. One of these categories is the precise amounts of the annual fees that will be charged to the various license types. What we saw in these emergency rules is that the license fee structure for these types of licenses is different than and typically a lot lower than the amount of fees that are going to be charged if you are a medical marijuana license holder. In addition, they established a category called the equivalent license category, which was very surprising to me and many others who read the rules. It wasn't unheard of, but what the regulator did is they essentially created equivalent license types so that a license holder under the Facilities Licensing Act, the Medical Act, could also be a license holder under the new adult recreational law and could combine their facilities and activities, which is going to be a very efficient way for both medical and non-medical marijuana to be regulated and made available to citizens in the state of Michigan. There are a number of other provisions, including the creation of a number of new license types that were not expressly mentioned in the statute. For example, the periodic consumption lounges, a license for excess production by Class C growers, which will be very important for those growers who really want to establish a major foothold in the industry in Michigan, and a number of other license types that will address particularized needs of the marketplace. Right now, you need to know what the next steps will be. The first and most important step is sometime a few days or maybe a couple of weeks before the 1st of November. LARA will issue the actual application forms. We don't have those forms yet, and so many of the elements that an applicant will have to meet, we don't know exactly what they're going to look like. So anyone who's interested in applying for a license under the new MRMA law should be waiting for those application forms themselves. And then on November 1st, LARA and the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, which acts as a division of LARA, will begin actually accepting licenses for adult use recreational activity. Now, interestingly, in most cases under this law, in order to be eligible to apply for a license under the adult use law, you need to already hold a license under the old medical marijuana law. And a license is a very precise term. It's not simply that you were pre-qualified and eligible for a medical marijuana license. You actually have to have a medical marijuana license in order to qualify to apply for an adult recreational license, with a few relatively minor exceptions. So if you don't have that medical marijuana license, a number of people have been asking, well, does that mean I'm blocked from applying forever? Absolutely not. On November 1, the regulator will begin accepting applications, but there is no cutoff on that date. So when you are eligible, when you do obtain your medical marijuana license, at that time you will then be eligible to apply for an adult recreational license.